Alright, so I'm going to run through an alternate process that I use for making ASCII using a Chrome extension called Pixel Perfect, thanks to the player of Vincenzo on ARCS for this. He pointed it out to me, and I'm very grateful. There are some differences. I'm not going to be abandoning Photoshop completely in my workflow, but I'm glad to have this as an alternative to point out to people because the actual process doesn't change all that much. It's just all within the Muse window. That does have some limitations, and there's some quirks that are obnoxious, but it's pretty good. So what I just did, there's a gradient pink square up in the upper right hand corner, and that is the Pixel Perfect, or the Perfect Pixel Chrome extension. I opened that, loaded an image that I want to use, and I started to futz around with the placement of the image, but I realized I needed some text to define where Muse actually puts the text. The whole point of the process that I use is aligning text to an image that's underneath it so that I can really get text to conform to all of the curves and the shape. Doing it in Muse, you don't have to change the text attributes like you do in Photoshop, where depending on the size of your image and how big you want your final ASCII piece to be, you have to change the text size and the line height, and it can be very particular to get something that actually winds up the same shape when you port it over to Muse and then port it into the mush. This is pretty straightforward because Muse is already pretty close to what the mush looks like, and it's a little bit more stretched out vertically, but it's pretty good. So you don't have to do any of that. You just have to put enough text on the screen so that the screen doesn't scroll, which I'm getting rid of some of these lines of text. All these lines of text are just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0, 7 times in a row, and then a bunch of rows of that, so that I know that the width of my final ASCII isn't going to be wider than 70. That's a pretty good place to have your ASCII so that it's not inserting weird line breaks for people with fixed width clients. Alright, so here I'm nudging the image up so that the top edge is aligned with the top edge of the part that I actually want to be part of the art is aligned with the top of the numbers. And I'm also doing a little nudging on the left side to make sure that the left edge that I want to be part of the art is aligned with the left edge of the numbers. And I changed the size as well so that it's a nice big piece. And then I'm going to use the tool within the Pixel Perfect window to lock the placement. This doesn't always seem to work, I think it might work better if you lock it, leave the window, and then come back. And then I'm about to delete all of this nonsense and just get to typing, which is familiar from my Photoshop video. If you watch that, it's literally just typing in letters to conform to all of those edges and fill in the parts that I want to be part of the art. I've moved away from having just a giant block of @ signs and then editing them to get rid of the extraneous stuff and just directly typing in. It takes less time, and so that's how I do it now. If it is helpful to use that, paste a bunch of @ signs over it or a bunch of M's or whatever main letter you're going to use, if it helps to do that and then use that subtractive process, by all means do that. You can find that in my other video, which I'm going to be linking in the description. I'll also link the Perfect Pixel Chrome extension and probably list a set of characters that I find most helpful in creating edges that conform to curves and diagonals and all of the other shapes that I wind up using. I don't use the full range of QWERTY characters, plus numbers, plus special characters. There's a very limited subset that actually wind up being really useful to me. But a lot of that is about my aesthetic and my preferences, and so you might wind up with a different character set that is your go-to. I'm going to let it type real time here for maybe another 20 seconds, and then I'm going to fast forward us a bit to where I have a full block of ASCII text, and it'll look good. It'll look, a little insipid because it won't have color and all of that, but it'll get us to the place where we can start talking about coloring. Using this process, it's really nice because you can actually color right in the mush window with the color of the art that you're trying to replicate right there, and you can kind of color match a little bit. The more the color that you choose disappears, the closer you've gotten to what you want to use. You'll notice through here, most of what I'm doing is just typing at signs, except for when I get to an edge in the art. It would seem like this is where most of the work is, but honestly, after the practice that I've had, this is a very small part. Most of my time is spent coloring, and I do that in a single pass. It's about to slow down here, and I'll take you through the last couple rows at real time. Not all that much slower, but there are still choices to be made on every row. Okay, so I have my ASCII text pretty much sorted out here, just finishing up the last line. Then I'm going to change the opacity so that the colors are very clear to me. I don't think I wound up changing it that much at all. And then I'm just gonna select sections up here in this upper left section and color them the second brightest red. The second brightest red is 400. And go through and color all the stuff that's unambiguously bright red. Toward the lower edge of this top left section, it sort of starts to fade into a paler pink and then a purplier pink, and so I just follow along with what I'm seeing and choose colors based on what gets a good match. The better I'm doing, the more in theory the text should disappear into the background image. So here I'm choosing 500, that's the brightest red. And I'm going to go ahead and let it play real time through the process of finishing this upper left corner. I have a good deal of background with RGB color theory, and so finding colors that match is a little bit more, I think, instinctive for me, just because I can probably look at any color out there in nature and go, oh yeah, that's roughly 50 FFDC in hexadecimal, which is a really nerdy thing to say, but in general, you can know that colors that are more vibrant are going to have a greater proportion of one color. The more you mix the three numbers that are in the three number set, so like 555, the closer to grayscale or the muddier tones you're going to get. Um, while the very, very vibrant blues, very vibrant greens, very vibrant reds are going to be pure, like 500 or 050 is a very intense bright green, and 005 is a very intense, like electric blue. Um, and then you add other colors to both lighten and desaturate the color. So, um, if you're going for something like a yellow, you're going to want no blue, and you're going to want to lean a little bit closer to green. If you did closer to red, you'd get an orange, and so on. Um, and that's just something that I'm used to. But you can literally, since this is all in Muse, you can literally just look at the picture and scroll the little sidebar on Muse and say, oh, that color kind of looks like that. But if you're paying attention to the numbers, if something doesn't look right when you paste it into the mush window, it gives you the power to go, oh, that's probably a number with a lot of red, and search for the pipe 5, and maybe find where you are in your text. And so I've taken the opacity down just to see what that section looks like. It looks nice. But yeah, knowing some of that RGB color mixing theory is it's pretty useful, and I encourage you to pay attention to the numbers that you're using and how the colors change um, as you add a little bit more green or a little bit more blue. First number is always red, second number is always the amount of green, and the third number is always the amount of blue. I'm going to go ahead and speed this up now, and I'll slow it down as we get to the end, but just one more quick look here. Looking good. And I'm going to continue. Right here, we're coming to the end of a section I was doing with this magenta and purple, and trying to get pretty close. I wasn't being super particular. There's not like a huge advantage to high fidelity for a piece of art like this. I've got 2 sections left to go, 2 of these little ribbony sections, and yeah, I'm going to speed up again. Alright, so I finished my first coloring pass here, and I'm going to drop the opacity to see how it looks. I didn't like a few things about this. The red, purple, and blue sections got a lot more love than the yellow, green, and orangey, peachy section did. And so I'm spending a little time adding gradients at the edges to help things blend together. This has less to do with fidelity to the original image and more to um, my tastes. I want something that looks more blended, and so I'm going through and I'm adding that. The original image that I used is a watercolor, and so I'm emulating an artist who is um, emulating in their own medium an effect that isn't actually um, necessarily easy to achieve with watercolors, especially when there are breaks between continuous color sections. I also do watercolor, so I know like how tricky this is to match up these different sections. So I'm trying to get it to look more like what I imagined the watercolor artist wanted it to look like in the ASCII. And this is just me kind of being precious. I'm not like, this is not a step that you have to do. It's just when you step back after your work is done and the base is done, you have to decide at what point it satisfies you. And I wasn't done yet. I wanted a really nice smooth gradient from piece to piece. When I got completely done with the entire thing, I found that I was still dissatisfied with the color in the lower right a little bit, but I was done. I was not wanting to fuss with it anymore. But I'm pretty happy overall with where this wound up, and I'm just gonna let this run now for a little bit. All right, speeding up. All right, and we've pretty much got it where I want it color-wise. I'm going to convert it here in a second to mush code, and I'm going to think it in my mush window so you can see what it looks like. It's always a good idea before you say, yes, I'm all done, to check it in your mush window because colors can turn out subtly different. Gradients can look not as great as when you did them originally. So here's what it looks like. And yeah, that's pretty much it. We're done. If you have questions, please leave comments or poke me on the mush. Thanks. Bye.